Donald Trump is like a child in so many ways. But one that is being exposed today by the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein is the fact that Donald Trump believes if a problem isn't within his sight and if he just runs away, it doesn't exist. But that is not the case. Donald Trump canlailed his Super Bowl plans out of fear for what Bad Bunny and Green Day will say. And now things are only being made worse, because while Donald Trump is going to be watching the Turning Point USA All-American halftime show, one thing that he can't avoid is the mega viral PSA that Jeffrey Epstein survivors are putting out during the Super Bowl and is already rocking Donald Trump on social media today. But it is not the only move concerning the Epstein survivors that has Donald Trump spiraling and is getting a lot of attention. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss conversations like this. What Thomas Massie had to say this morning on CNN about what he's been talking to the survivors about as it relates to a redacted list that he will be able to view starting Monday. Yeah? It's got Donald Trump scared.
You know, she's not, if you notice, they don't put her out in front anymore. They put Todd Blanche out in front because she's been all over the map. She has no credibility on this. She said there are a bunch, there's a ton of files. They're on my desk. I'm going to release them. And then she said there's nothing but, child sexual abuse material. And nobody wants to see that. And then she said, oh, we found a whole bunch more, and there are going to be more investigations. But what are those investigations, for instance?
Yeah.
And so there's a whole host of questions for her, but I'm glad that she's coming to judiciary. She hasn't been there since she's been attorney general.
How are you going to respond if they don't fully comply with the law? I mean, you had told me before that you may go to the floor and actually read the names of people on the alleged Epstein client list. Are you still planning to do that?
I'm ready to do that if the victims want me to. They believe that the best way to get justice is to force the DOJ to release these names. I've already read one name in a committee with the FBI director there. That's Jess Staley. And again, he may or may not be guilty, but he's been accused by these victims, the lawyer tells me. And there are other names. I don't have them in my possession, but if the victims want to give them to me, I've expressed that I'm willing to do that. But again, the best way is to force the DOJ to release those names on those 302 forms.
Is greater than Massie should absolutely go right down the names that are on that list and read them aloud, because we already know that it exists. There was a habeas petition filed by Ghislaine Maxwell in prison as she attempts to secure her pardon or appeal her case. And of course, Donald Trump will probably be helping with that in some way after her testimony tomorrow, in which he's going to plead the fifth. But there were already 25 names listed of people who paid off Jeffrey Epstein and 4 co-conspirators whose names that we do not know. So absolutely, Thomas Massie should go and find those names and read them off, because members of Congress are going to be able to view an unredacted Epstein file. They're not allowed to bring their phone. They're allowed to take notes with them. I'm sure we got a couple of smart people. Thomas Massie went to MIT. Maybe we can remember some names. I trust him. Not a dumb guy, no matter what Donald Trump says. But yeah, you need a leak at all. You need to go to the floor of the House where you are protected and start lifting off names. That is absolutely what we need right now. And I'm glad that Massie actually, unlike anyone else in the Republican Party, is talking first of how the survivors will feel, because that is what we should be thinking about, always protecting the people who Donald Trump has thrown under the bus and who has re-traumatized with the failed release of only so many files. That is one of the most damning, devastating, and illegal parts of what has gone down with the release of the files. That survivors have had to relive trauma, have had to be doxxed, have had to have their personal information shared. And it is why they are pushing back and making it clear to Donald Trump that on a day that he tried to run away, he can't. And Trump sure did try to run away. As we have covered, the real reason Trump is skipping the Super Bowl is kind of obvious. Trump claimed the game is too far away privately, but his advisors warned him that he'd likely be booed if he went to the big game. Sources tell Zateo, Donald Trump said that the big game was just too far away, even though he has a plane that we pay for. But the real reason is, of course, what we all know, that he'd be booed, humiliated, and mocked at the Super Bowl. Now, Donald Trump isn't going to the Super Bowl, like I said, out of fear of the boos and the very public humiliation. So he's having himself a little party at Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure there will be, women in giant cocktail glasses and seafood towers, because Donald Trump, he can't stand those elites. Donald Trump can't stand the elites. But what's going to happen anyways, Donald Trump will be viewing, is this ad right here.
After years of being kept apart, we're standing together.
Standing together.
Because this girl deserves the truth.
Because she deserves the truth.
Because we all deserve the truth.
Everyone who is working under Pam Bondi at the DOJ is complicit not just in a failed redaction of the Epstein files, but a failed release. And it continues to be that way. The names of these women who have already had to be traumatized, but are being traumatized again by Pam Bondi, are still in some of these files. And they're not redacted. But we know the DOJ jumped immediately to go and redact Donald Trump's name, to take out Howard Lutnick's name, to take out Elon Musk's name. But what did Todd Blanche say? He said, oh, you know, if you're in the files, we have a little tip hotline, and give us a call. Shoot us an email. We'll get back to you in 3 to 5 business days. Sure. That's how much they care about the survivors. That's why they had to delay so long, because that was the excuse that they gave. Remember Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi? Oh, we got to make sure we cross every T, dot every I, don't want any names to come out. Well, apparently the only names they were afraid of coming out were the names Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, any other big billionaire or elite close to this administration. That is who Donald Trump was worried about protecting, and they still weren't able to, which goes to show how much more there is in the files. If Donald Trump's name, 38,000 times, it appeared more than Christ does in the Bible, was in an A version of the files that was redacted, imagine how much more there is. Imagine how many more mentions are in the 3 million files they still won't release. And if what we read in these files is what they're comfortable with getting out there, just imagine how bad the rest is. So I don't want to hear Todd Blanche or Pam Bondi invoke the survivors as a reason for their excuses. And I think it's pretty telling that Pam Bondi can't even come before the press or Congress anymore, that they have to send Todd Blanche out to do her bidding, because she is so bungled. All of this, I said it again and again and again. And I'm glad Thomas Massie does as well, that anyone involved in this cover-up, anyone who allowed these survivors to have to be hurt again, needs to be prosecuted. There needs to be real accountability. Donald Trump has so-gified, and the right has so memified this, tried to pretend that it's a joke, tried to make you numb. Every news outlet calls Jeffrey Epstein a disgraced financier instead of a sex criminal connected to the most powerful people in the world who are still protecting themselves from accountability. He's not disgraced. That is the understatement of the millennia to say he's disgraced. I think it goes a lot further than that. But they want you to be numb. They want you to look past. They want you to forget it is so obvious that they truly think that this is just funny, that this is a game that they can play and try to win. But they can't, and they haven't. But that's how they view it, as a game, as a joke. It's why Donald Trump told Caitlin Collins to smile more. No surprise that a man has abused women and girls, immediately jumps to misogyny when confronted about a question about his own abuse. It's not a surprise there. But the Epstein survivors, they don't think it's funny either. That's what one told Caitlin Collins in this clip. That is just as important as ever, given that PSA going out.
When you hear the president say he thinks the country wants to move on from the Epstein files, is that how you feel?
Well, first, let me say, Caitlin, thank you so much for having me back. And I know I don't just speak for myself when I say I really appreciate how persistent you were in questioning this administration about their failure with this release. I don't think it's something to smile about, and I thought you handled it very appropriately. I'm not surprised that Trump is ready to move on and that this DOJ is ready to move on, but we are certainly not, especially after we saw how poorly this last release of documents was handled.
And what is it that you do want? You know, people see this release, there was information that a lot of people felt should have been redacted that wasn't, or information that shouldn't have been, including that of victims and survivors that was. What was it that you've heard and that you saw?
I saw three primary issues with the way that where we are right now with this release. One was there were, for people that aren't looking through these documents themselves, I think it's hard to understand the quantity of documents that included personal identifying information about survivors. A list of names that was literally called the Epstein victim list that had something like 40 or 50 names, primarily of minor victims, completely unredacted except for one name. right? And then, as we know from the New York Times reporting, nude images of girls and young women that were released by our government, that's really them distributing child sexual abuse materials, right? Like, these are horrific things that happened during this release. And so those are, that is a huge issue. But then we also saw documents that were, victim statements completely blacked out, 3 pages of black ink, and then a small portion that wasn't, saying something like, this is why I'm so scared of these powerful men that harmed me. So obviously, people in positions of power continuing to be protected, the exact thing that the law was supposed to outline was not supposed to happen. And then third, we know that there is other pertinent information that has still not been released. Of course, people are continuing to sort through files. There is a lot, but for example, my sister Maria Farmer, in the first release, we saw part of her 1996 report to the FBI where she outlined the theft of photos that she had taken for her art, but she also described her own assault at Les Wexner's property, and she described my assault at Zora Ranch. And I don't believe there's any way that those were not documented as well, and we're still not seeing that. Is it because it included other names of powerful people? We don't know, but when they say we've released everything that's, pertinent to this investigation, we're not buying it.
Yeah, when people said they wanted to see the Epstein list, they weren't talking about a list of underage girls that he assaulted. They're talking about the powerful people in his orbit and accountability for that.
Is greater than Donald Trump thought he could run away and hide from the embarrassment that will come during the Super Bowl today. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think we're going to get a great Bad Bunny performance. I think we're going to get a lot of angry tweets. Donald Trump already started the day by attacking Team USA. I think he'll have a lot to say about the artists who are going to humiliate him. But it doesn't matter if he shows up to the game or not. Tens of millions, 100 million Americans will see that PSA, see Donald Trump be called out and have his crimes put on notice that he cannot hide from. And I hope the TVs are on at Mar-a-Lago for it to be broadcast very, very widely for more and more people to see it. We are certainly going to be covering it on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you